Back in the 1950s, there was an early television sitcom known as The Phil Silvers Show. It gets a lengthy write-up on Wikipedia, including mention of a memorable episode that my memory focused on Friday night when I was involved in one of the craziest cluster Fs I've ever walked into. Now, I use that term because there is none other better to describe what actually happened to me. By the way, Merriam-Webster actually offers a definition for it. Quote, a complex and utterly disordered and mismanaged situation, end quote. Getting back to Phil Silvers, on the show he played Sergeant Ernest G. Bilko. He headed up a group of haphazard soldiers in a Army base. They were in charge of the motor pool. Now, I don't ever remember seeing an actual automobile, let alone a Jeep, in any of the shows in the 4 seasons that it ran. Instead, Bilko and his troop spent most of his time scheming up money-making scams, many of which were based on gambling. Now, if you remember McHale's Navy, this show was the Army version, only years earlier. The noteworthy episode took on the story in which Bilko and his men were assigned to overseeing Army physicals for a bunch of recruits. Now, one of Bilko's men had a pet chimpanzee, nothing unusual there, and somehow the chimp wound up in line with the recruits. Well, you guessed it. The chimp begins going through the Army physical with all the humans, and since all of Bilko's men have their noses buried deep in their clipboards, no one ever looks up and spots the chimpanzee. Early on in the assembly line procedure, each recruit has to give his name. Well, when the chimp is asked his name, of course he doesn't answer. The examiner says to him, "Hurry, speak up." The examiner's assistant says, "Got it," and he proceeds to write down, "Harry, speak up." And now the chimp has a name. And so the process continues, one hilarious moment after another, until the chimp makes it all the way through, passes the physical, and is issued an Army uniform. It is a classic example of a cluster F. This past Friday night, I became the chimp, and the only difference is that eventually I realized what was happening. Here's my story. I had to get a medical test as an outpatient at a nearby hospital. It was a simple test, just to rule out a possible blood clot in my leg. Very simple procedure. For my test, they had only one appointment left before the weekend. I took it. Oddly enough, it was on Friday evening at 5:30. Now, the lady on the phone explained to me that the admissions office for outpatients closes at 5 o'clock, so I would have to register at the reception desk in the ER, and then I'd be taken to wherever it was in the hospital to have my test done. Now, I've been to this hospital's emergency room several times for myself and for others, so I'm familiar with the routine. When I first arrived and I was told to have a seat while they checked out my ID and insurance credentials, a blood pressure cuff is wrapped around my arm, my temperature is taken, and they pinched my fingers with one of those finger-pinching thingies. Then I was pointed to a chair, told to sit down and wait for the nurse who would come fetch me. I should have had my alert system fired up by now. None of these things, except for the ID and the insurance checks, happens when you register through the normal outpatient admissions desk. So a nurse comes and she ushers me back to one of those curtained rooms in the ER. I explain to her that I'm an outpatient, that I've come there not for an emergency, but to have this simple test done. And by the way, why do I have an extra wristband on? And it's red, and it says allergy alert. I don't have any allergies. She doesn't know either as she glances down at my admissions papers. Well, now she pulls out a hospital gown and she tells me that I need to remove my pants since the test I'm having begins in the groin and it works its way down the legs. Okay, that makes sense. She leaves, I make the transfer from pants to gown, and I sat on the bed. And there I sat, and sat, and I sat for an hour and a half. That's normal for the ER. That's not normal for being an outpatient in the other part of the building. It's now that I realize something is amiss. At the moment, the person with the little rolling computer cart stops by to check my credentials again. She had me sign the usual forms that nobody ever reads, despite giving permission to some judge to put me in jail 10 years to life for things that maybe go haywire because my insurance coverage doesn't come through. Well, then next the doctor comes in, and he asks me a bunch of questions about my illness. And he says I should have my blood work done. I told him, oh no, not necessary, thank you anyway. I have that scheduled for next Tuesday, where I normally get it done. He said it should be done now, and I said, no, I can wait till Tuesday, and plus that it'll cost me a lot less if it's not done here in the ER. He leaves a little testy that I was testy. I wonder for a moment why a doctor stopped by to see me. That doesn't happen when I'm waiting for a test as an outpatient. Well, I wait some more, and then it begins to hit me. Now I know what is happening. Everyone thinks that I am there as an ER patient, and I have some kind of emergency for which I've come to the hospital's ER. Now I'm being treated accordingly, including being visited by a doctor and other multiple people, asking questions, to being made to wait for hours. Well, that's all normal for the ER. I'm the chimpanzee who's come in the wrong door, and I got processed like everyone else who comes through that particular door. Well, I check the rear of my gown for modesty's sake, and I wander outside. There are patients sitting in wheelchairs and on gurneys lining the corridor. Just a few feet away is the hub of the ER where Mission Control resides. It's staffed with a large number of people, all in scrubs. Some are busy doing paperwork or looking into their computer monitors. Others are holding clipboards, while others are still on the phone. It's a beehive, and things and people are buzzing all about. I stand at the counter for a few minutes, attempting to determine which bee I should approach. And then from behind me comes, "Can I help you?" I turn around. It's a young male nurse, and he has come to rescue me, or so I think. I explain to him that I've been mistaken as an ER patient. I have been there for several hours, and I'm only there to have a simple outpatient test. I further explain that I've had all these kinds of people and nurses attending to me, and that's all not necessary. I get the distinct feeling that he thinks I'm an elderly, disoriented patient who really doesn't know who the president is or what year it is. As I pessimistically return to my assigned sanctuary, a lady walks in. She's dressed in civilian clothes, and she tells me she's ready to give me my test. Wow, whoopee! Well, she takes me to her test room, which is in the normal outpatient part of the hospital. I explain my predicament to her. She agrees. Somehow I've been mishandled. Well, the test lasts about 5 minutes tops. She returns me to my cell in the ER, and in comes the doctor, telling me he called my doctor to confirm that I should have my blood test done. I told him not a chance. I explained that to him, that I don't need my blood work done, that I have it already scheduled elsewhere, and I'll get it done there. Thank you very much. Well, the intentionally good doctor still doesn't get it. He asks me if I'm indeed refusing the blood test. I tell him yes. It'll cost twice as much done here, and I have it scheduled. How many times I got to say that? Well, and I said to him also, which he probably didn't like, and if I have the blood test done here, it's going to take another 2 hours. No, thank you. Well, he tells me that I have to wait and sign some papers testifying that I refuse to take the blood test. Well, I told him, please go get the papers, but don't be too long. He looks at me as if I don't know who the president is or what year it is. 10 minutes later, I'm still sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the exit door, which, ironically, is about 20 feet from where I sit. I begin staring at that door. Well, guess what? I transition back into my shorts, and I decide, time's up. I leave. Now, I'm sure this is only part one of my story. I figured since I just spent several hours being treated as an ER patient, guess what? The hospital and the doctor will both be billing me as an ER patient. I shall call the billing office and alert them to the situation, and that both my insurance company and I should not be charged for an ER visit. I'm sure it'll run in the thousands. Somehow, I don't think my message is going to get through. This is going to be going on for months. Just you wait and see. Part 2 will probably be an even bigger cluster F. Thanks for listening. I'm Mark Kuhn.